Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Entrepreneurship Unlocked. Today, we sit down with Dr. Lawrence Kessler and Dr. Scott Flashner. They own Restoration Health 365. Their practice is all about health optimization, disease prevention, and regenerative therapies. Dr. Kessler is also the author of Optimology, The Future of Medicine, a book that challenges the status quo on conventional healthcare and lays out a roadmap for identifying and fixing the root causes of illness, not just masking symptoms. Dr. Kessler and Dr. Flashner, welcome to the show.
Good morning. Nice to see you, Nate.
Yeah, great to see you guys. So, I know that before you guys started Restoration Health 365, you guys were doctors, right? But what inspired you to make that leap to create your own practice rather than continuing to work inside of the traditional system?
Well, we actually started our careers together back in residency, back in the early 90s in Manhattan. And finishing emergency medicine, we both subscribed to the kind of private practice of emergency medicine. We felt that emergency doctors, which are typically employees of the hospital, become salaried physicians with no equity and no long-term goals. And so we looked at developing a private practice of emergency medicine where we formed a medical group and contracted with hospitals to provide the professional services in the ER. We did that for several years. We saw the winds changing in the Northeast as far as emergency medicine, and then we branched out into urgent care. Again, with the same model of owning the practice and bringing in physicians to develop equity and become partners. So we've always had a inclination towards entrepreneurship rather than working just for a salary.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Did you guys have that inkling for entrepreneurship? Would you say, like even before you went to school for medicine, or was that something that was more like a gradual build throughout your career?
No, we when we were in residency, we both knew that we wanted to do something more entrepreneurial.
Mm-hmm.
We did work in the traditional system for a while, and over the first 4 or 5 years after we left residency, we got the opportunity to start doing the contracted care with hospitals for emergency medicine. And really, that was the beginning of our sort of entrepreneurial streak. We moved from the emergency medicine realm, and we saw that things were changing in the political atmosphere of that to urgent care. And that was in about 2000 that we made that switch. And from there, we for about 15 years practiced in the urgent care realm. Then we switched, and why don't you go ahead and tell them about what switched occurred?
Sure. And understand that the private practice of emergency medicine it wasn't novel, but it was novel in the Northeast. It is almost the basis of emergency medicine practices in the Southwest and in the West, and even in the Midwest.
Mm-hmm.
But the Northeast typically lags behind the business model in medicine. And towards about 5 years ago, when we were looking to exit the urgent care, we started looking into the wellness aspects. We spent a career, sewing people up and fixing them, but realized that while that's important and helpful to people, there's got to be more that we can do for our patients. And so we we discovered that this functional medicine, functional medicine has its roots back in the early 90s by a physician who had a nutrition background, who felt he wasn't doing enough for his patients with chronic disease, with conservative medicines, what was available in commercial pharmacies. And so that physician developed the nutrition aspect and called it more functional medicine, looking at a more holistic approach. From that, we've developed what's called a systems-based analysis. Systems-based is not new. Engineers use it, physicists use it. It's a way of looking at the entirety of a problem on a systems-based analysis. And so now we do that, and that's became what I created, the next iteration of functional medicine as optimology.
But I just want to say that it wasn't just like 1 second we said, oh, let's just transition. Over the last 30 years, while we were working in the emergency department in urgent care, obviously sewing somebody up, fixing a trauma patient, that's obvious. But we kept seeing patients 90% of the patients we saw in the emergency department or in the urgent care were basically chronic disease patients who we were just putting Band-Aids on what was happening to them that minute, but we weren't changing the underlying illness that was causing that problem. And, over the last 4 or 5 years, Dr. Kessler and myself was saying, there has to be a better way. And that's what Larry was talking about, is that we saw that functional medicine really fit that. We're not just Band-Aiding people. We're actually taking and trying to look at the underlying issues and fix those and make them healthier, which then leads into the optimization of medicine.
Because traditional medicine, in its roots, is more of a symptoms-based process. You go to the doctor with a symptom, and they treat the symptom. And that's what commercial pharmacies provide, is symptomatic relief, without looking again at that root cause of the disease. And so ophthalmology takes functional medicine to the next level by really delving deep into the hormonal aspect, to the nutrition and exercise movement, to the lifestyle, even incorporating regenerative and reparative techniques. And so in treating the root cause of disease, you prevent the long-term sequelae of chronic disease.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I think a lot of doctors in today's world are just focused on, putting a Band-Aid on it, for a lack of a better term, and focusing on symptoms, not necessarily the root causes. Can you guys share an example of a case where you've helped the individual really narrow down that root cause and how that really changed outcomes for them?
Sure. We see a lot of overweight and obese people. And as you know, these GLP medicines, these what they call skinny shots, they have ballooned in popularity over the past 15, 20 years, originally for diabetics, for lowering a marker of diabetes. But what we found is that when you treat the visceral fat, when people lose weight, visceral fat is not inert. It just doesn't sit there in people's guts. It's actually secreting inflammatory chemicals and proactive chemicals. They're pro-cancer, pro-diabetes. So, for example, we had a fellow come in about a year and a half ago. His doctor said he was borderline diabetic. His A1C was a little high, and he put him on an anti-diabetic medication. Well, we did a deep dive into him and found out that he was both vitamin D deficient, thyroid insufficient, and yes, he was mildly insulin resistant. And we took those root causes and treated them. And within 8 months, not only was he not diabetic, he had dropped significant weight, his cardiac risk factors went down, his blood pressure went down, and his sugar was completely stabilized.
Wow.
So we have a chance to do that for a larger number of people. And that's, to us, is the most rewarding aspect of medicine, is really making an impact on people's lives. That is long-term, not short-term. Again, sewing up a laceration or setting an arm fracture, yes, helpful and necessary, but it's a short-term fix. It's not the long-term management of and preventing the chronicity of disease.
That's fascinating. It makes me wonder how many people out there that are, diabetic without, maybe they're not diabetic, right? And they've been incorrectly diagnosed and they're nutrient deficient in a ton of different areas. That's really fascinating. I'd never heard anything like that.
Well, because traditional doctors don't look, again, when a traditional doctor looks at the lab tests that we do, if you fall into a normal range, they tell you, you're normal, go home, exercise and lose weight, or it's in your head, let me give you something for your depression and your anxiety. No, they're depressed and anxious because they're not in balance. So get the body in balance. And, again, some people subscribe and understand this, and some people don't. So, we have to take with what they come with and start their journey with them.
Yeah. I'd imagine tons of people across the country and across the world are super nutrient deficient just because they haven't maybe done the appropriate blood work or had a functional doctor take a look at those reports from the blood work that maybe they did do. Is that something that's very common in your practice? People come in and they're extremely nutrient deficient in like a few key areas. I know vitamin D. I lived in England for a year, not a lot of sunlight, and really quickly realized I needed to start taking vitamin D because, it was the middle of December. I was like all down in the dumps. And I'm like, what is going on? I feel off, and yeah, started taking a vitamin D pill and everything was resolved within a couple of days, basically.
Yeah.
But
You don't
are
realize
there
it's,
like,
yep, vitamin D is actually a hormone. It's a
hmm,
misnomer to call it a vitamin. It's actually works as a hormone. And it's
interesting.
critically important. And yes, if you live um, in New York or you live north of I guess it's the 38th parallel, whatever that is, yeah, from November to April, you don't get enough sunlight.
Hmm.
And so impossible to convert. And here's the other problem is people think vitamin D and they go buy a vitamin D. They don't understand that there's several different types. And if you take D2, you need to convert it to D3. And if your kidneys aren't
Hmm.
working, you don't have sunlight, you don't do it. And not only that, if you're just taking D3 without the K2, the balance isn't correct and it doesn't work like it should. So there's
Interesting.
nuances that, the average physician doesn't understand that we've come to embrace.
Fascinating. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense though. And I know that a big part of your guys' practice is also hormone optimization. Why is this so critical and why is it so misunderstood in our healthcare system today?
So, hormones are terribly misunderstood, sadly, because of some poor studies that came out about 25, 30 years ago. And there are political and economic pressures. So,
Mm,
big pharma can't manufacture bioidentical hormones because they can't make what the body makes. They can't patent that. So, they come up with synthetic hormones, and that's where the problems lie. The real crime in hormone therapy, sadly, is the perimenopausal and menopausal women who have been
mm,
denied hormone replacement therapy because of some bad studies, again, that came out about 25 years ago. Um, you know, the Women's Health Initiative really put a damper, and the rate of hormone prescriptions dropped, I think, 70% after that study because the media took the findings and kind of blew them out of proportion. There was they said it increases your risk of breast cancer and increases your risk of stroke. Well, if you look at the absolute numbers, it was 3 out of 10,000 people, women, that had a stroke.
hmm.
3 out of 10,000. Uh, not so risk adverse, but 3 out of 10,000 is not a number I'm going to worry about so much.
Yeah.
And so when you look at the actual raw data, the data was manipulated and misconstrued, and again, the media runs with a narrative uh, at the time. So yes, hormone optimization. And the people that say that hormones are toxic, I ask you, look, when are your hormones most optimal? And it's usually about your third decade of life. So in your 20s and 30s, how many 20 and 30-year-olds are in the cancer wards dying of chronic disease? So it's
Fair.
not hormones that are toxic, it's actually the lack, because the hormones maintain our internal balance. They
Hmm.
optimize our function and our health. And it's only when they start to decline in the fifth and sixth decades of our life that we see the increase, a dramatic increase in chronic disease, whether it's hypertension, diabetes, obesity, heart disease, stroke, cancer. These all come later in life because we don't have that internal balance that we used to have. But let's be clear, optimizing your hormones doesn't mean you're not going to get sick. It doesn't mean something can't happen. There are many factors that go into your health. Lately, we talk about what they call EDCs, or environmental disrupting chemicals, and they're everywhere. And so they affect our DNA, they
Mm.
affect our internal systems and clocks, and our hormones I have to work in balance with those. So,
So
mhm,
EDCs like microplastics, for example, or what exactly are those?
absolutely, microplastics are a great example.
Hmm.
But there's heavy metals out there that in certain industries, plastics, the environmental disrupting chemicals there's gases out there that you could be exposed to
Hmm.
that are disruptors. There are antioxidants. There are other chemical structures out there that we don't know we're being exposed to.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, that's definitely scary stuff. And especially living in a big city, it makes you wonder how many of those things on a daily basis that you're being exposed to. Especially myself, not in the health and wellness space. Like I have no clue. And there's probably so many times a day where I'm running into EDCs and probably so many ways that I could avoid them that I'm not even aware of. Um, is it are there things that people can do on a day-to-day basis to avoid them, or are we just kind of living in a world where it's like, hey, these things exist, good luck?
Avoidance is difficult if you don't know they're there. But being out of balance and getting that checked out and having the evaluation to unlock whether or not you have EDCs or you have systems, biological systems that are disrupted. So we may not see the disruptor, but we can see the end result of the disruption and then work backwards to try to find out, is it a DNA issue? Is it a chemical issue? Is it a protein deficiency? Is it a peptide deficiency? And so we work backwards once we discover the problem.
Makes sense. Where do you guys see your line of work going in the next 5 to 10 years? I've had a few guests on recently that are in the tech space. They talk about AI like crazy. But what are you guys seeing in the health and wellness space? And where do you anticipate things will be 5 to 10 years from now?
Well, I think that, the newer physicians who are more open to newer types of medicines are sort of looking at this. I think we'll see more and more people coming into the space of functional optimization medicine. I think that it will gain bigger popularity. I think it's fairly large in the Southwest, the Southeast. It will become more predominant here in the Northeast. I think it'll become a more mainstream as more and more people look at it and find the benefits of what we're doing. Short of that, I can't tell you. Medicine's a fickle thing. Things can go sideways and change in a minute's time. But I think also what we have to get is the conventional medicine physicians, the old school guys, to start embracing it, not just looking at their prejudice of traditional medicine, and start opening up and looking at the newer aspects of what's going on.
It's very difficult to unlearn what you've learned and you think is the rule. That's one of the hardest things in medicine or any field. But what we're finding is that this next generation, even the youngest of the baby boomers, and I guess Gen X is the next one, they're discovering that an investment in their health is far greater than treating declining health. And so, one of the biggest obstacles we face with not a lot of people, but some of the people who come our way is that, well, why doesn't my insurance cover this? And the very fact is that insurance doesn't see what we do, or our healthcare system is not designed to incorporate what we do, because the octopus, the conglomerate of the American healthcare system is so complex, but it's driven by disease, injury. I mean, you go to the internal referrals in a hospital system between the radiology, the laboratory, the intervention. That's what drives business. The healthcare is a business. And so preventing entry into that system is counterintuitive to the system. And while I tell some of my patients, your healthcare insurance, they give you the gym membership. Yeah, they'd like you to be a little healthier, but they're kind of hoping you hurt yourself and you have to go see the orthopedist. So, there's that aspect of it. But, true prevention. You know who does true prevention well? Veterinarians. And I'll tell you what. If a horse or a cow breaks its leg, what does a farmer have to do? Yeah, he has to put the animal down. But that animal has such value to the farmer, whether it's a product or a work. So in veterinary medicine, you rarely see a cow or a horse break a hip or a leg because they have such great preventative policies and procedures in place. Those horses and cows stay healthy. Well, in people, where's the incentive? I can tell you that the orthopedist gets about $25,000 for a hip fracture, and the internist gets $250 to prevent it. So where's the incentive in medicine to prevent the hip fracture? Is it to treat it and fix it, or prevent it?
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, look, there's no secret that our insurance system, our healthcare system is totally out of whack in the United States. I used to work as an insurance sales rep for Aflac, and the insurance policies that I would sell, on some of them, I would make 30% commissions, it's absolutely insane that 30% of what you're paying for your insurance is going to a commission like that. That was something that really blew my mind and made me question, like, am I in a line of work that I want to, that I'm waking up every day and feeling good about what I'm doing? And the truth is I really wasn't. Right. And, using kind of scare tactics to get people to buy, like it felt like a really dirty business. And, that was just from working there for, about a year. So yeah, that's something that, I think most Americans are aware of too, is the amount of money going to these insurance companies, the the amount of times that they don't want to cover you when something happens. It's something that, again, I think most Americans are aware of, and it seems like nothing's really being done. And that's we should probably give that credit to the people in DC and the lobbyists and all the money that's being spent by these healthcare companies to make sure that big revolutionary changes aren't being made to the system. And it really sucks, but it is kind of the reality of where we're at.
We spend way too much on healthcare in this country. But again, our healthcare bill would be cut in half if you reduced chronic lung disease, COPD, diabetes. Obesity, smoking, and diabetes would knock out, I think, half of the healthcare bill.
So one of the glimmers going back that I've seen of hope in terms of the mindset of physicians fighting against sort of that big pharma, big medicine kind of industry is that we're seeing more and more patients who are being told by their cardiologists or internists to go find somebody to give them the GLPs, the skinny shots, because all the cardiology associations have now recommended that that's good to decrease your cardiac risks. And so they don't know how to do that because insurance companies aren't paying for it. They're saying to the patients, go get GLPs. GLPs are a peptide. And they're telling them to go get it. And that's sort of a new sort of opening to understanding that there is a way to prevent disease.
And that's a huge deal.
That's a glimmer of hope I see.
Yeah. And people, they hear peptide and think, oh, that's got to be scary, right? Well, you know what the first peptide is? Insulin is a peptide. It's the one we've been using the longest. And so peptides are nothing more than a few amino acids, which are natural in our body, and they're linked together. But they work as signaling molecules and messengers and activators of chemical processes. And, you asked before, with the nutrition. And so an interesting fact is a serving of spinach today has 10% of the iron the same serving had in 1930, less than 100 years ago. And that's because our soil is depleted and the mass production of food. So, we have more iron deficiencies, and that's why people are on multivitamins with iron. So there is a nutrition, and again, what the new HHS secretary is doing with the food and getting dyes out. I mean, this is all stuff that's we've known about for years, but getting the companies to subscribe to this and remove it from our diets. Nutrition, food is medicine. Whatever you put in your body is a form of medicine. You put good stuff in, you get a better product.
Absolutely. Well, I feel better now, definitely after the last few things you guys said, opening up GLPs to the world and having doctors actually recommend those. That's something I really wasn't aware of. And that's great to hear that there are being steps taken to kind of open things up and help people in using maybe newer technology, or maybe it's technology that's always existed, but we know for a fact that it's helping people. To go back into the kind of entrepreneurial side of your guys' lives, again, you guys came from the emergency room medicine world to urgent care, and now you guys are fully independent, right? And I'm sure there's tons and tons of doctors out there similar to you guys, right? Maybe they're 20 years younger than you, and they're currently still working, in the system of traditional medicine. What would be a piece of advice that you guys would give to those types of doctors that are thinking about going independent?
It's a good question.
Well, my first piece of advice would be, don't be afraid to take a risk. I always think back, my father once taught me years ago, he says, Milton Hershey had 7 failing businesses before he finally realized to put chocolate on top of the caramel. It may sound silly, but if you don't know how to fail, you'll never know what success is. So, and doctors by creature definition are fairly risk adverse.
Mm-hmm.
So it's removing that adversity to risk, I think, is the biggest impediment for doctors to go out on their own and try to build a practice. It's not impossible. It takes hard work and dedication, but so does any successful business. So it's just a matter of your adversity to risk for some of us.
Yeah, and I would say do it as early as possible. Don't wait.
Mm.
The longer you wait, the more difficult it is to get out of the mindset into traditional medicine. You have to do it early when you have less responsibilities in the world and you can take that risk. You know, we did it when we were young. We were basically right out of residency. We took that risk. And it's paid off several times for us. But I could see that if I hadn't taken that risk early in my career, it would be very difficult to do that later on. You become more entrenched in what you're doing, and it's more difficult to break those bonds.
Yeah, the complacency gets comfortable when you're in a situation like that. The other barrier I would say that's fearful for people is, you know, the sense of competition out there. And my feeling is competition is a good thing. I welcome competition because it makes me better. And you know, we don't race to the bottom as far as price or quality goes. You know, stick by, you know, value, the intrinsic value that we bring to the practice, that any physician brings to the practice, has to be front and foremost. That value has to be translated, and patients need to understand what you bring to their table, to their life. And when you do that, you're gonna win. You're gonna be successful.
Absolutely. Yeah. Competition is certainly something that helps improve industry overall, right? Having private practices, you know, pop up left and right is a great thing for the healthcare system, for the patients, and for you know, everyone doing business in that industry. It's certainly you know, one of the best ways to kind of improve the industry overall. So that's something that definitely makes sense. And, you know, to go back to like complacency, right? As a doctor, I would imagine it's got to be extremely difficult, right? You may have a ton of debt from medical school. You might be getting paid a really good amount of money, right? Working for, you know, working kind of in the bigger system. You might have like a pension, right? A great 401k program. And you're saying to yourself, you know, why would I want to give all of this up to take a huge risk and maybe not even make half of what I'm currently making with, you know, without the benefits too? And that's something that is very serious, right? And that's something that people should consider. But, you know, if you are a doctor that has that itch for entrepreneurship, or you are someone that could identify gaps in the healthcare space and fill those gaps with answers and with services, you know, you should absolutely do that. I think that that's super important that we have people like you guys that are willing to take on those risks. And yeah, I just think that's incredible overall.
So I do feel, unfortunately, entrepreneurship in medicine is decreasing. And one of the reasons, just like you said, is to find those gaps, is that those gaps have become smaller and smaller than they used to be. In 25 years ago, if you're a physician, it was easy to go out, put up your shingle, open your practice, do a couple of things, and be independent. But with what's going on in the industry right now, with you know, VP and private equity and hospital systems buying medical practices, it's very difficult to open up your own practice. I find there are very few new practices out there. Most physicians go out and join large groups or join hospital systems, because one of the problems with the entry into medicine is, of course, insurance. So they can't get on the panels unless they join those practices. And it's very difficult in traditional medicine. There are no gaps or places you can go, like what we're doing, that lead to entrepreneurship. And, you know, all young doctors should look at that. If they're not satisfied with what they're doing in the traditional medicine, there are still gaps available, but it's not as widespread as it used to be.
Fascinating. Yeah, that totally makes sense. Definitely a tricky industry to get into. And it sounds like, yeah, because of corporate America, you know, big companies buying up smaller practices, it makes it even more complex, which, yeah, super fascinating and really something I wasn't aware of. If I had to guess, I would have said, I think that a lot of these functional, you know, medicine practices are opening up. And while some of them are, it's probably not at the rate it should be, right? We're still very much entrenched in the traditional system. But as we move forward, hopefully we see that start to flip, because that, I think, for everybody's sake, that would be great.
I think patients are going to start welcoming that, because when they buy up the big practices, it becomes a volume issue, seeing more and more patients with less and less time. We're at a point now where we see 2 people a day, maybe 3. I spend 2 to 3 hours with my patients in the office now.
Mm-hmm.
I could never do that in urgent care, and you couldn't do that in primary care. But with the model based on insurance, it's not a care model; it's a volume model.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, insurance reimbursement is fixed. Now you have another layer of profit sort of withdrawal. So you have the VC or the private equity who has to take their 5 to 15% a year in profit, or the hospital system. So there's less and less money available to distribute. So how do you fix it? You have to see more patients to meet that.
Yeah.
So
and then
that's the underlying problem with medicine.
Yeah.
At this point.
And it's like I said, with the barriers, insurance companies, for all that they're worth, they are essentially practicing medicine, because I can write a prescription and they deny it. So they're practicing medicine. The patient needs a procedure, they deny it. They're practicing medicine. If I can't get on a panel, then the insurance company is limiting my practice, and that's almost restrictive. And yet there's no barriers for them.
And one of the interesting trends now is you can go on TikTok or Instagram and watch physicians have calls with insurance, peer-to-peer reviews, and watch these surgeons get denied over that. It's become a trend now. Any kind of sort of important procedure they want. And it's absolutely ridiculous listening to some of the insurers and the reasons for their denials. In fact, there are some of the colorectal surgeons are talking to internists who are denying them, specific. It's a very interesting thing that's going on in terms of medicine.
That is a fascinating trend. That's a fascinating trend that I was not aware of.
But underlying it is the corporate practice of medicine.
Wow. That's wild. Well, I have one final question for you guys, just for the listeners at home. What is one healthy habit that you wish that more people would adopt?
Exercise.
Daily. It's the one pill. We have this biggest struggle with our clients is taking the daily DE, daily exercise. And, especially when you're on the GLPs, my patients ask, do I have to exercise every day? And I tell them, of course not. Just on those days, don't eat. And they say, what do you mean don't eat? Yes. But again, exercise is not heading to the gym for 3 hours. By definition, exercise is intentional movement. So if getting up out of your chair once an hour, 10 times, and doing 10 air squats, or you have little dumbbells, an intentional movement, get out and walk 20 minutes 3 times a week. For my patients, for our clients over 40 and 50, it's more about resistance training to maintain the muscle mass, but both are really important. And understanding that, yes, movement. How many obese 90-year-olds do you see? You don't see them. They're all lean, because you don't get to 90 at obese. And so moving every day, staying in motion, a body in motion tends to stay in motion, right? The physics principle. Daily exercise, probably the hardest thing for people to digest.
That's great. Yeah, that's great. I think, just moving the body in general is huge. I mean, I try to do a couple days, 2-3 days of weight training a week if I can. And I try to get in like a 45-minute walk at least a few days a week, not only just for, the sake of exercise, but just clearing my mind. I mean, it really does wonders. And just, being out in the sun, walking around, breaking a little bit of a sweat, like it goes a huge way in my mental health personally. And quite honestly, from a business standpoint, I have some of my best business ideas while I'm, in motion, while I'm doing that really light cardio, right? It's not too much where I'm like running, where that's what I'm entirely focused on, and I'm not really thinking of anything else. I have the idea that I had to start a podcast was something that came to me on a walk, right? I was thinking to myself, I really want to create more content. I need to find ways to do so that work with my schedule. I can create a podcast and then have a bunch of clips created from that and post that on social media and share that with the world. And, that was a thought that I had while I was walking. So not only does exercise and movement help with, your physical well-being, your mental well-being, it could even help with your business as well, which is something I think our listeners can take away.
One of the things that we do in our business is we actually take every one of our patients, we run them through sort of an exercise physiology test. We quantify their level of abilities, whether that's through an RMR or a VO2 max. We do a strength test along with the DEXA scan so that we can monitor and evaluate that part of their well-being. And along with everything else we do, that's part of the functional medicine that's the root cause of some of the issues, is we take that and we redo that over a period of time to make sure they're moving in the right direction. But it has to be quantified. A lot of people say, oh, go out and exercise. Okay, great. But are they really exercising correctly? Are they doing the right things? Are they improving in their exercise? Is it helping them change their body habits to be a healthier person? So part of what we do is that. That's part of our functional medicine practice.
Every patient I've ever encountered has told me, my doctor said, eat better and exercise, but they don't tell me how. We give specifics. And when you give specifics, objective data, with objective measurements, with a proven menu of how to improve it, life improves. And that's really why we're here, to improve lives.
That's great. I love that. So yeah, guys, check out Dr. Flashner and Dr. Kessler. You can follow them on social media at Restoration Health 365. You can go to their website, restorationhealth365.com. Go ahead, fill out a form, get in touch with them. They can absolutely help you if you are overweight, if you think, you're feeling off, you're feeling out of balance. These guys are great at what they do, and they can be some of the best people to help you. Dr. Kessler's book, Optimology, The Future of Medicine, is also available on Amazon. Go ahead and check that out. And yeah, just want to thank you guys for joining us today. This was a really great conversation.
Thank you very much, Nate. So good to see you, and appreciate everything.
Awesome. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode with Dr. Lawrence Kessler and Dr. Scott Flashner.